May 21st is only a few days away, so all of you XRP holders need to prepare. I understand that you may be wondering why May 21st. What makes that day so unique? Why should I get ready for that? What will occur on that day? Will XRP blow up? Will it fall apart? What are these markets doing? That's a question I believe everyone wants to know the answer to because it's been so tense. Alright, so Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping are alternating on trade negotiations. And to be honest, it's getting really predictable at this point. Trump is going to claim that he has concluded a deal with China. It was fantastic. The greatest bargain ever. We're not even speaking to Trump at the moment, China says. What are you discussing? Then, a trade agreement is signed between the United States and China. Almost immediately after, China threatened to retaliate if we didn't do as they wanted. I mean, pretty much anything politicians say. Take a look at the opposite. It appears to be similar to what's taking place, the way they make bullish announcements, then negative ones the next day, and then bullish ones the next day is a complete farce. It doesn't seem like it's ever actually the case. In the end, I believe that all of these nations are fighting for their own interests, and if you've ever wondered why the markets are so erratic and crazy, it's quite insane to witness what's occurring on the global stage. Okay, so this is the exact reason why, in case you missed it, the United States and China recently met in Switzerland to discuss a trade agreement. Their tariffs would be reduced. China dropped to 10% and the US to 30%. They also decided to continue doing this for 90 days. However, the Trump administration has made it clear that they will increase tariffs again if China does something that they find objectionable. China also made the same statement. China is now effectively threatening to react against the United States. Why is this now? As I mentioned earlier, China recently released a statement regarding the US's adjustment of chip export controls, arguing that the US had substantially weakened the agreement agreed during the Geneva talks. Days after the US-China trade agreement was signed, China is requesting that the US make amends for past wrongdoings. And they may be asking, what is the connection between XRP and all of this? And the response is crucial. All right, the state of geopolitics has a significant impact on the markets. We have repeatedly witnessed this occur. These agreements have an impact on stocks, cryptocurrency, and the rise or fall of people's assets. Following this, there are also some incredibly fascinating developments occurring in the economy at the same time. The yield on the 10-year note has increased by an additional 11 basis points, while the yield on the 30-year note is now above 5%. Bond markets are acting as though inflation is increasing. If the Trump administration doesn't step in, there won't be a recession or trade agreements. In other words, something has to happen quickly, or Americans will be squeezed for their money even more. 8 mortgages are getting more expensive for longer periods of time. We are experiencing record-high mortgage rates, record-low sales, and record-high housing prices. I mean, it's everywhere at the moment. It's completely crazy. How anyone can still afford to live in America, at least for the average person, is beyond me. Additionally, the rest of the world, including Japan, is impacted by this. The yield on Japan's 40-year bonds recently reached its highest level in more than 2 decades. As Japan's GDP continues to decline, Prime Minister Ishiba has referred to the situation as worse than Greece. The GDP of some global economies is declining. And this makes sense, of course. Everyone is engaged in a trade war at the moment, and trade is declining along with GDP and productivity. Therefore, it stands to reason that economies will likely contract as a result of this. Unfortunately, this is the situation. This is the exact outcome of trade wars. Yes, the GDP is declining. In the end, the trade war usually results in one side winning. These countries typically emerge because they have the most leverage and the largest and most significantly impacted economies. And there's a significant probability that the US will succeed. Conversely, Japan finds itself in a dire predicament. Furthermore, China is also in a very bad place. Deflation is what they're dealing with. There is no spending by consumers. Their GDP is declining. All of these factors are really worrisome. Amidst all of this, we are witnessing that the affordability of housing has hardly ever been worse in history. A home worth $400,000 is unaffordable for 94 million Americans. In contrast, a new home is expected to cost $460,000 on average. In other words, a normal-priced home is out of reach for 70% of U.S. households. The fact that 53 million households cannot even buy a home that costs $200,000 or more is concerning. In contrast, the United States has only 22.4 million homes worth less than $200,000. Currently, there is a severe housing imbalance. And once more, this is not limited to the U.S. This is in Canada as well. It's in Australia too. It's in Europe too. In essence, it's turning into a neighborhood where only the wealthy can afford to buy, and the typical working class just cannot afford a house. And that is an indication of a seriously troubled economy. Lower savings, more debt, and, of course, a contracting or about to contract economy are all indicators of it. Very soon, and this is something that has happened in many other economies in the past, the United States must address this once more by reducing its debt. The Fed must reduce interest rates. In order to solve this, the US dollar must be printed, which implies that inflation will eventually occur. However, the Fed is opposed to printing money due to trade wars, claiming that there is a great deal of economic uncertainty and that lowering interest rates could lead to an economic disaster, for which they do not want you to bear the blame. What do you folks think about that now? It's all up to you people, but in the end, there are some really difficult questions to address at this time, and the ideal response is unknown. We may just rely on past examples to determine what will likely be the best course of action. And the only way we can likely address these particular imbalances is to cut rates. The US dollar must be depreciated. More money moving across the economy is what we need. This holds true for almost every location on the planet. The EU is printing money for this reason. China is currently printing money as a result. Japan is printing money because of this. They must, definitely must, but the United States. Since the US still controls the majority of the world's currency and thus has the most leverage, they are not doing it at the moment and are instead extracting as much value and resources as they can from these other countries before they begin to do the same. They have the ability to exert pressure on all of these other economies until they collapse. At that point, when the United States is on the verge of collapse, they may begin printing money and succeed, which is their objective. Their goal is to be more liquid than their rivals. They wish for their rivals to experience economic collapse and to be able to purchase goods and services from other nations at a significant discount in order to gain a significant advantage in this race. The U.S. government wants to accomplish that. In essence, that is what the U.S. government is trying to accomplish here. Thus, having said that, have a look at the pricing of XRP. It has been bouncing around everywhere. Although many are unsure about our future, there are a few signs that point to what is most likely to occur. First, we can observe that XRP went from being overbought to being oversold. We've lost almost 3.91% in the past day alone. We were up 3.19% yesterday. In essence, we are currently discovering our bottom within the next few days. I'm buying on all these red dates for that same reason. This is where you can view a buy. This is where you can see a purchase. The reason I'm making today's film is because I'm preparing to buy more. If we go lower, I'll buy more, right? The following 48 hours are essentially the following 2 days. I really believe that we will find our bottom. Indeed,